Part three of my NFL summer series. We're live on Thursday, July 9th, and it's time to talk about the underachieving AFC South. Not too many Super Bowls, not too many Super Bowl winning teams in the AFC South. Is anybody ready to take that next step? Are these teams improving? Let's get right into it and let's talk about the AFC South, starting alphabetically with the Houston Texans. As the first slide, and again, I'm doing this on PowerPoint so that you guys can copy and paste anything you want, take what you like out of it. If you disagree with it, that could be part of your research as well. Houston Texans, they got off to a slow start last year, but when the dust settled, look at these stats. An under 60% pass defense, which was third in the NFL, a very strong 47-31 sack ratio. We had some questions about how the O-line would hold up for their quarterback, but seemed to do just fine for C.J. Stroud, and a whopping plus 17 turnover ratio with a very opportunistic pass defense. Why am I putting this stat next? Opposing kickers made just 18 out of 27 field goals. That's more like a random stat, and you can learn from this kind of thing. If an average team, would probably make somewhere around 22 out of 27 field goals. So in reality, the Houston Texans got quote unquote lucky by their opponent scoring 12 fewer points over the course of the season. Does that translate to even one win difference? Maybe not, but it might translate into a spread difference for those handicapping the NFL. It's just unlikely that opposing kickers, especially in a stadium such as Houston's, where they would, of course, play half their games, would make just 2 out of every 3 field goals. So look for regression in that area, negative regression from the Houston Texans. No changes to this coaching staff that is certainly one of the best in the NFL. And maybe I'm going to try to make a case for how they've overachieved over the last 2 or 3 years based on metrics. Not much happened in free agency, which is a good thing for Houston because they were turning over their defensive roster a little bit more than expected the last 2 or 3 years. Roster didn't change much finally this year, but they added an important ingredient in running back Montgomery. He proved his worth as a timeshare running back in Detroit. He's ready for more action. And with Marks there, who would probably thrive more, be more productive in a timeshare himself, this strengthens their backfield. The schedule, they went 9-0 down the stretch last year. I'm not sure they're going to be doing it this year because they have probably three, maybe even more cold weather games at the end of the year. And the first 4 games are tough. They got off to a slow start last year. We'll see what happens this particular year with a tough early schedule. We're not going to see a lot of great draft classes here. If you were with me on Tuesday, everybody had a top 10 type draft class between Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cincinnati. We're not going to see any top 10 draft classes here. 29th ranked for Houston. I isolated Marlon Klein, the tight end. The AFC South does I don't know how to put it. They're just horrible at drafting value with the tight end group. Martin Klein is not the 59th best player in this past draft. He's not a top 6, 7, 8, 9 tight end in this year's draft class, but he was drafted at 59th, which is the second or third tight end drafted on the entire board. This is a misuse of draft capital. The rest of the draft was more missed than hit. I like Aiden Fisher, the 243rd draft pick, as somebody that would be hard to kick off the roster. Will he be an every down impact player? Probably not, but he's going to be a force on special teams. People who know me know that I care about special teams. If you flip the first 2 picks, they got it right. Rutledge is more of a second-round pick, and McDonald is more of a late first-round pick. So that saved their draft, really, the first 2. After that, much more missed than hit. Next slide, unanswered questions. Will that run game improve? Too much pressure on the quarterback to get it right. And when they lost their lead wide receiver down the stretch due to injury and missed him in the playoff game, Houston's playoff run stopped. Run game could add for run pass balance. That would help them out. in my opinion, defense each year, I mean, you can count on Houston having a really good defense. You can count on certain teams having really good defenses, but it doesn't always translate right away. We saw that last year. How will games 1-4 play out? Will Houston maybe have a ceiling of 2-2 to start the season because defense takes a little bit of time to gel? Although I do like it that they didn't make as many changes as they had in the past in free agency. The team's goal is to get all the way to the AFC title game. They've been contenders, but whether it be Baltimore or Buffalo or Kansas City or somewhere along the road, they've been stopped along the way. I think their goal has to be to reclaim the AFC South and win at least one playoff game. Here's where it gets tricky. I do metrics every year on win totals, and I have a track record, 25 years worth of data that shows me stuff that when a team is due to regress and when a team is due to climb. A lot of that used to be based on Pythagorean theorem, but you can't just use that anymore. That's too mainstream. You have to combine it with turnover data, sack data, pass defense data, the schedule data. There's a lot of things that you can use along with Pythagorean theorem concepts that can strengthen your argument as to whether a team's going to be up or down. I have metrics that said that teams in Houston's ballpark would be somewhere between 70 and 75% regression in both year 2024 and 2025. Of course, that means if I believe that they would regress 25 to 30% of the time, they won't regress. And Houston was the outlier. I had them under 10 wins in 2024. They got to 10. Some people even, the number was 9.5 and 10. Obviously, for under, I took 10. Last year, it was 9.5. Again, pointing down under, and that looked pretty good at the beginning of the year, but 9 in a row, and Houston sailed over their win total. I was not involved because I wanted a full 10 and couldn't get it. I think, again, they're in a it's a tribute to the coaching staff that they can, even though I expect plus 17 turnover regression and maybe more field goals made against them, they still have the best coaching staff in this division. They have the best defense in this division. I won't touch this total. I would strongly lean under again if we saw a 10, but we're seeing a 9.5 right now. I do not expect a repeat of 9-0 2025 season-ending run. With all the changes in the AFC South and the other coaches, this could save them again. Here's my strategy, take it or leave it. As they go through, maybe survive a 2-2 start, and then they get better and better. Then they start to have those outdoor games in late December and January, or maybe even early December if you look at the schedule. I'd consider a fade. You can get some season win totals, maybe on straight bets or whatever. If I'm right about Houston, that they're not quite to the level of the echelon, 28.5 is a good power rating, but it's not the 30 of Baltimore and Buffalo or some of the other teams. I think I would consider a fade closer to the end of the season. Let's go to the Colts. One of my favorite teams to cover, partially because of the uncertainty. There's so much, to me, volatility here where they can come in first place or they can come in last place. They were one of two teams I felt that I did not have a handle on last year and kind of stayed away from them a little bit in the betting market, which turned out to be wise. They got off to that great start. Daniel Jones started to level off, and then he got hurt, and the whole program started to go downhill, and they didn't win many, if any, games down the stretch. But stat-wise, the one stat I picked out is they had 29 sacks allowed, which I did not expect. And they had a top-tier run defense, which I did not expect. I think part of that on the defensive side of the ball, they did change coordinators, but I didn't expect to see stats such as this. Coaching staff remains the same. So I think they overachieved a little bit last year, but they certainly would have made the playoffs if Daniel Jones stayed healthy. Pittman was a loss, and I think the possession receiver that Pittman is, I know they paid Pierce. I know Pierce had 20 yards per reception, unheard of in today's NFL with a lot of the short passes and so on. Pierce is a really good player, but Pittman may be missed more than people think because he was the guy, along with tight end Warren, that Indianapolis and Daniel Jones went to on third down conversions. And a part of that is going to be missing, along with three other players. In my estimation, the roster is a little bit weaker than last year, which means they have to be a little bit better than last year in order to achieve the same results. Tough travel for about a 4 or 5 week period in the middle of the season and some early season challenges, but overall, probably a fair schedule. A lot of teams have easier, and there are certainly teams that have tougher schedules than the Colts. This was a good effort by Indy. I've been hard on Ballard. I wondered why GM Ballard even kept his job over the last year or two. I think they did better this year. I'm not sure about the Oregon linebacker twice. I think linebacker is a position that's definitely going to be improved. I think they got a little bit of value here, there, and so on. Burks is a smaller receiver. I've discussed it before. The reason why he went 254 and not in the 130s like other people, draft analysts, experts thought, is because his size. He can only do so many things with his size. But I think he's value at 254. McGowan, if he gets his life in order, could be value. He had a lot good yards per carry at Kentucky. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, kind of the way Indy plays it. They definitely added talent. So while they subtracted talent in free agency, I think they made modest gains during the draft, which is actually better than their other three compatriots in this division. This was probably a draft that I would rate in the 11 to 16 range, which is higher than the rest of the AFC South. Unanswered questions. How healthy is quarterback Jones? They say he's going to be ready to go week one. That's fantastic. What's his true ceiling? I was surprised that he was sacked so few times last year because his pocket presence, his time clock was really off both at Duke and with the New York Giants, but it markedly improved last year. Let's see if that continues. How much of a loss will Pittman prove to be? Who becomes that third down target? And here's where I say, even though I personally don't play player prop overs for the season, there's a valid reason. I can make a case, and I'm not going to share it now, but let me just say you have to hit 64% if you want to bet overs. You have to have that kind of percentage in order to break even in college, in NFL player prop overs, which has to deal with player health and so on and so forth. But I can tell you have to be a really smart guy to bet overs. But if I were betting an over, based on the chemistry between Warren and Daniel Jones in the first half of the season, when Daniel Jones was out, Warren's production went way down. And also based on the fact that Pittman is not on the team anymore, I think Warren's going to do a lot of damage in year 2 in the NFL. My goal and the team goal is the same. We saw Jacksonville win the division last year. We saw Houston win the division the previous years. The goal for Indy has to be simple: win the South and make the playoffs. Maybe even steal a game there. There's no excuse. They have to make the playoffs this year, or some heads may roll. Their win total started 8.5. There's some 7.5s now, and people are betting the under. Again, I think this team is really volatile. It could go any way in direction. I have them a little bit better than average. That's what a 26 power rating is. The metrics say they're better than 2025, which is good. The roster says they're a bit weaker. I still need another year of data to prove that this O-line can protect Daniel Jones. Maybe you fade them early, you come back late. There's a lot of strategies I can use with them. They may finish in 4th, but they may finish in 1st as well. I've seen 2 places with plus 400 to win the South. I don't think it should be any worse than plus 300, which means you have a little bit of ROI. If they played out the season 4 times, I think Indy would win 1 out of those 4 times. So you have a little bit of value at the plus 400. Again, it could go either way. I'm semi-bullish on this team, but I'm not 100% sure that they're going to carry it out. There's too many variables. The roster has to be a little bit better and so on. A little tricky schedule. Don't have any comments right now, I see, as I'm doing this live. But for those Indy fans and anybody else, if you want to make comments, I will come back. next day, few days, and so on, and look and see. So if you have any questions, comments, am I dead wrong on something? Am I on to something? Do you have a question? Do you want further explanation on something? Please leave your comments in the chat under YouTube, and I will come back and look at them. Let's move on to Jacksonville. Let me apologize in advance for what I'm going to say about Jacksonville for Jacksonville fans, but I loved what they did last year. Liam Cohen, kind of a nomad, where it'd be 1 year at Kentucky, 1 year at the Rams, 1 year at Kentucky, 1 year at the Rams. Well, now this is his second straight year in Jacksonville, and the first year was definitely a success. The draft was decent last year for the first time in a while. We see a negative sack ratio, but it was about 50-50 at the end of the year. They did benefit from not that hard of a schedule last year, but to be honest, the first year defensive coordinator was a revelation. That was a great effort by him. I'll have to lean more into whether or not he can produce this. This defense was solid, and I think they really improved on this side of the ball, which really helped Trevor Lawrence manage the offense and not get into trouble. Couple of losses in free agency, so a little bit of a net loss. They lose their running back, so you want to have that run-pass balance, of course. And they lose a pretty productive linebacker in Lloyd. I have Jacksonville's schedule as the 6th toughest, and therefore the toughest in this division. Of course, they're playing a first-place schedule, so you get a little bit of that. But in general, it's a little tougher just the way the player, just compared this year to last year. It lacks pacing. That's an understatement. They're going to play their 2 games in London like they normally do, and they're going to play them against pretty established teams. So teams that I think can handle the trip. So I think you're looking at maybe a split in that. They don't have necessarily an advantage. I'm giving them, because they're so familiar with the trip, a 1-point quote unquote home field advantage. But I think that might even be stretching it. Even after that, later in the season, they play 6 road games in an 8-week stretch. So there's no pacing to the schedule at all. This is going to be something they're going to have to navigate. Maybe a little bit more prime time because of how they played last year, first place. So people want to see them, Trevor Lawrence. And of course, they're going to play some of these opponents that might have some revenge motive against them. So this is very tricky for them, in my opinion. Let's highlight a tight end again. There's no part of the universe where Nate Borkercher is the 56th best player in the 2026 NFL draft. There's no place in the universe that he's the 2nd or 3rd tight end. Eli Stowers went a couple of picks before him. The Jaguars had 10 or 11 picks. Why aren't you trying to trade up ahead of Philly to get Eli Stowers, who had a draft range where he would have been selected in the high 40s, low 50s. There's such a disconnect between how Jacksonville views the draft and how most of the other teams view the draft. I know the Jacksonville GM got incredibly defensive when he was defending how he doesn't look at other teams' mock drafts. He doesn't care about that stuff. They do their own weighting system. They don't bring players in. All this stuff, that's garbage. You have to know where you're getting value. Maybe you like Nate and you like him a lot, but if everybody else is saying he's a 4th-round pick and you're taking him at 56, you're doing a disservice to your organization. With the exception of pick 88, the offensive guard, I would say every one of these picks was either overdrafted or barely in the range that I would say that they would be in. You're going to have a lot of roster cuts here. And if you have injuries, and injuries happen in a 17-game compressed season where the NFL schedule makers are going to have you facing short weeks, you're going to have injuries. And the second string of Jacksonville and the rookies on this roster, not equipped to deal with it. This was tied for my last draft, and it's not even a question because other people saw this as well. I'm not the only one to see through Jacksonville's draft class. This was a terrible use of draft capital. Unanswered questions. One of the problems I have with Lawrence, who gets streaky good and limits his turnovers to quite a great extent. I really like watching Lawrence operate, especially in the 4th quarter. The problem I have is Superstar NFL quarterbacks are usually 65% all the way to Drew Brees numbers in the low 70s. You don't see too many superstar NFL quarterbacks below 64.5, 65%. Whereas Trevor Lawrence, throughout his career, has struggled to be above 60, 60.5, 61%. I would like to see him improve his pass completion percentage. Every extra pass completion is 11 or 12 yards in general, which is one extra first down, which is more time of possession, et cetera, closer to field goal range with the new kickoff rules. I could go on, but it's important that Trevor Lawrence improve his pass completion percentage. And maybe we'll see it with the second-year staff. Again, what happens if injuries hit? The goal should be still to return to the playoffs, not necessarily a goal to win the division with the schedule that's harder than the others, but returning to the playoffs. I think both the team and myself, there would be some disappointment if they weren't able to return to the playoffs. The win total is 9.5. It's kind of a bet ticking toward the under. There's a little bit more under action. My power rating, based on the way the defensive coordinator worked, based on the fact that I still like Trevor Lawrence and they did a lot of things right, it's 26.5. It's not as high as Houston's, but it's slightly higher than Indy. But both Indy and Jacksonville are just slightly better than 8.5 teams. I have their power rating in a decent range. What I don't like is how they drafted and some of the signs that might be pointing down. Bearish on the draft class. What were they thinking? Reading furiously, I can't think of a situation where I've seen pigs being able to fly. Now, maybe they can fly, maybe they can't. But this is just to say in my own sarcastic way, because when I do my draft reports, I like to mix in some comedy. Sometimes that comedy isn't pretty. I'm bearish on Jacksonville, and I'm going under their win total. I just don't see a replication of what they did last year. Now, I will put an asterisk. I didn't put this in the slide and probably should have. Last year, they made an incredibly bold trade to get Travis Hunter out of Colorado, the two-way player, the Heisman winner, the defensive back, the wide receiver, and he got hurt after just a few games. And now he's going to be pretty much cleared to go full go by the start of the season. If he is indeed that superstar, I could be on the wrong side of under 9.5. So I'll be watching Hunter closely. That's what September's for. If I need to pivot, I'll pivot. There are ways to pivot in terms of the schedule, and that schedule is going to be tough. But I will watch Hunter and see what he does, because maybe he could flip the equation just a little bit. Not so many good stats for the last team in this division, the Tennessee Titans. Almost 70% pass D. When you're in big trouble if 7 out of every 10 passes get completed against your defense. As far as their offense, not a great offensive line protecting for a rookie quarterback. Not a great blend of wide receivers to help out Cam Ward. 56 sacks allowed. That wasn't an anomaly. If you look at the number, it's about 53 or more if you take it on average the last 5 years. They must get better on the offensive line, change their scheme, add free agents, do what they need to do, because that's just going to kill your franchise and it's going to kill your quarterback who got hurt in game 18 last year, Cam Ward. So what you want to do, you have to pay attention to a lot of areas on this team, offensive line and defensive secondary for sure. Robert Saleh is a new head coach. I don't mind him getting the second opportunity. His first opportunity was with the dysfunctional New York Jets. I'm not sure this is a great opportunity. I'm not sure that he's anything more than an average coach. Brian Daboll, who also was with an organization that didn't do him any favors, the New York Giants, had a good first year as a head coach, but then kind of regressed. But one thing he did do, they put up points on the board. So I'm kind of lukewarm positive on the offensive coordinator hire. I'm lukewarm negative on much-traveled Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley had some really good spots. Again, not a great head coach. All three of these guys have head coach experience, of course, before. Gus Bradley had some good years early on as a defensive coordinator. If you look at his last 6 years, it has not been pretty. Gus Bradley has not been able to do the job, and I'm worried about that. This team did improve a little bit. They were aggressive in free agency. They signed a lot of people. I'm not saying they were great games, but I believe the DL and the DB, areas on the defense that needed to be fixed, got a little bit better. So that's good news. Schedule is good news as well. No primetime games, no rest disadvantage, a nice pacing. Once again, a team like Tennessee cannot blame the schedule if it doesn't go their way. Well, I don't have a tight end to give you in Tennessee, although I wish they had a chance to add impact at tight end, chose not to. There were plenty of tight ends that they could have added that were ignored in the 50s that could have been picked at pick 95. There was one. There were a couple of others. They waited to the very end to pick up a tight end. They went for need at wide receiver. They took wide receiver Tate at pick 4. We know that was semi-controversial with a couple of potentially superstar guys in Reese, who went to the New York Giants, and the Washington linebacker. Washington picked one of the best linebackers. Wide receiver was their number one need. They went for need with Tate. Kendrick Folk, he's a very young edge rusher who underachieved at Auburn, but again, he was 19 or 20 years old. Based on his athletic profile, this could be a really good draft pick for them. So no worries with the first two. They got good players. Anthony Hill's a good player. Obviously, a necessary addition for a rated offensive guard. I highlight Nick Singleton because he spent a lot of time at Penn State. His yards per carry were good. He has some experience catching the ball. It's kind of the 3-down back that probably makes the running back group better. After that, it's a little bit more miss than hit. They have some guys who could help on special teams and fill out the roster. Not a terrible draft, not a particularly impactful draft, but based on what their roster was last year, their roster is better this year. Through free agency a little bit, through the draft a little bit. It's a better roster. It's year 2 for Cam Ward. Unanswered questions. I'm just blocking on Gus Bradley. I don't think that was the best hire. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. What are realistic expectations for this offensive line? Can they go from allowing 50 plus sacks on average each of the last 5 years? Can they lower it to 40? I mean, the league average is right around 38, 39, 40, 40 and a half. Can they get to league average with the offensive line? That would go a long way in helping Cam Ward have a very good second year. Goals are the same. Just get out of the cellar. Just shows some improvement. Finally, 6.5 is where their total opened. It was originally around minus 140. Now it's kind of two-way action. It's more in the minus 115, minus 120, 6.5. I actually would have thought that it would have been more closer to 5.5. I'm a little surprised at 6.5, but it just goes to show you that the rest of the division is vulnerable. There's no reason why, if the coaching staff can be better than the previous coaching staff, why they can't go 3-3 inside the division and still have several games against other fourth place teams. There's no reason why Tennessee can't threaten the 6.5. I'm neutral on it. My power rating is relatively low in the bottom 8 for their power rating. They're still going to have to prove it to me. One of the least talked about recent number 1 picks is Cam Ward, but he had a good season, minus the sacks. He had a good season. His touchdown to interception ratio was more than respectable for a rookie quarterback, and his completion percentage was respectable for a rookie quarterback. They've upgraded the talent. Again, Gus Bradley is my stumbling block. I wouldn't put it past them to beat any of the AFC South teams along the way, especially if they're in scheduling dilemmas, whereas it's a nicely paced schedule for Tennessee. But the bottom line is Tennessee is still 4th for right now, but there's room to move up. Let's see what Robert Saleh does in his second coaching stint. There you have it for the AFC South. I will be back next Tuesday with fascinating division, obviously. The LA Chargers, year 3 of Harbaugh, Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce. Can they rebound from an unusual year where they missed the playoffs? What's going on with the Raiders? And then statistically, Denver was outstanding last year. and one quarterback injury away from making the Super Bowl. So I will be back with the AFC West next Tuesday. Thanks so much for watching this. Again, please share with others. I'd like to grow my subscribers if I could. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.